Oh.
Oh my God.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you very much for joining us here at the Jurassic World Evolution 2 panel. It's a fantastic opportunity to come and talk a little bit about some of the amazing work that the dev team that I'm on stage with here go through. My name is Adam Woods. I'm the executive producer on the game. And with me, like I said, we've got a few special guests. And today we're going to be talking you through how we bring one of these prehistoric species to life. I was going to do it anyway until I found that I've been upstaged by an actual real-life dinosaur in the crowd. But we'll push through and try and get through it as best we can whilst not being attacked. Jurassic World Evolution 2 was the sequel, the much anticipated sequel to the first game that came out in 2018. It's a dinosaur management simulation game. And with the sequel, we brought a brand new, authentic, and compelling narrative that the players could play through, as well as expanded creative and construction tools, and of course, awe-inspiring new dinosaur species. And for the very first time, we also introduced marine reptiles and also flying reptiles. One question, one of the main questions anyway, aside from what's it like working with Jeff Goldblum, which is amazing by the way, is how do we actually make these dinosaurs that, 65 plus million years ago, the last person, which wasn't a person, saw them alive on the world? How do we do that? And I'm joined here today to talk a little bit about that. First of all, we will introduce ourselves. I've already done mine. It's over to Amy.
Hello, I'm Amy Hook. I'm the principal animator. I basically help make sure our dinosaurs are as believable and authentic as possible.
Hi, I'm James Mulang. I'm a senior designer, so I work on the dinosaur behavior management side of the game.
Hi there, I'm Henry Flewitt and I'm an audio designer, so part of my job involves creating all the sounds for these dinosaurs.
Hi, I am Emma Hefrati and I'm the concept artist, and that means that I get to draw the dinosaurs.
So where do we start with the process of building a dinosaur? As Emma will say in a moment, there's very little reference. Sometimes there's no reference at all with these long extinct species. Emma, it does start with you and the concept team, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So when we have a dinosaur species that is not already in one of the films or the TV shows, that means that we need to design it ourselves. So one of the roles that I have as a concept artist is trying to find that balance between staying authentic to the Jurassic Park designs and what makes them so iconic, but also staying truthful to the species and the science and the latest studies on how this dinosaur looked. So when I start, I'll always start with a lot of research. So in this case, we've got the Australovenator here. So I will work with usually a skeletal drawing. This one is made by paleontologist Ashley Patch. And once I have this skeletal, I'll start adding the muscle mass and the skin. And while I'm doing this, I'm also doing a lot of research into who was this dinosaur? Where did they live? What did they eat? What was their day-to-day life? And once that's done, we have what is called the vanilla design.
Sorry.
Anyway, we have what's called the vanilla design, and that will get sent to the 3D artist to get modeled. And it's called the vanilla because it's the most kind of basic reconstruction. We're not adding any fancy crests just yet. We will get to that later on. In some cases though, the Australovenator is very well researched, so we had this lovely diagram of the skeleton and lots of stuff we could read about. We have the Warhusaurus here that actually had really limited fossil evidence. So what you see there in white, that is the bones that we have of this dinosaur. So we don't have the skull. We have a back plate, but right now it's believed to actually be broken. So we don't even have the full shape of what this back plate looked like. So in that case, we look to the family tree. So the Warhusaurus is actually very closely related to the Stegosaurus. You might have heard of that one. And by looking at the Stegosaurus, we can fill in all those gaps in the design, figure out how it looked. Yeah, once we have the anatomy and the vanilla sculpt finalized, we can start looking into more fun stuff, like actually getting to design more of the personality of the dinosaur. So again, we've got the lovely Warhusaurus here. The challenge with the Warhusaurus is that we already had about 5 other stegosaurids in the game. So how do we make this one stand out while still making it look like a stegosaurus? So in this case, we look at other Jurassic Park designs. We look at nature. I like looking at not just reptiles, but also I'll look into a lot of mammals, birds. I've looked at fish, I've looked at insects. There's a lot of unconventional inspirations that you can use when you're making your own reconstruction. And yeah, it's also about finding that personality. So did we want to have a more slow-moving, gentle grazer, your kind of typical herbivore, or maybe a more alert kind of herbivore that, you know, you don't really want to get close to, you don't want to mess with them, but they won't like attack you outright. Or recently we've got the Therizinosaurus that got added, and that's an example of a very aggressive herbivore. Yeah, there's lots of different personality types that you can do with these amazing creatures. Yeah, once we finalize that design, that will then get made into a nice little character sheet like this, and it'll get sent to the 3D artist again to finalize. And while they're doing that, I will start looking at the scale materials. So we've got a lovely selection in the game of all these different materials and textures that we can use when we're making the dinosaurs. So that's always fun, kind of painting them on the model and seeing what kind of scales would fit this guy. So in the case of the Warhusaurus, we actually used a little bit of crocodilian scales, which is like a bit unconventional. You might not notice it straight away, but it created this really nice gradient of these harder scales at the top that kind of transition into more softer skin towards the belly area. And then we have some lovely final concepts here for you. So we've got the Kronosaurus and the Australopithecus that I've helped design, and we've also got the Tropiognathus, I think. And I think a common misconception is a lot of video games and movies or art of books will only show you these final images. I think a lot of people don't realize that there's actually a lot of loose iteration that goes into producing these final images. So we don't actually go straight into making a final super polished piece. We actually need to do a lot of research, lots of back and forth, changing the design all the time until we finally kind of settle on the one that we like the most.
Yeah, and I think I'm very privileged to work with the incredible dev team and see firsthand the depth in which you guys go to try to understand the latest scientific findings and I can't say that word, so I'm not going to try. Findings and kind of information that's coming out as much as you can to then inform these designs, and it's absolutely incredible. And I think you touched on it a little bit about the uniqueness and the authenticity of the dinosaurs. Another part of the expansion for the sequel was extra color patterns and body patterns as well. And along with it, we actually introduced brand new environments that the dinosaurs hadn't been seen in since in the first game from the tropical environments. How did that sort of open up the color patterns for you and the concept team, Emma?
Yeah, well, once we introduced all these new environments, because in the first game we only had this tropical environment, but now the player can place these dinosaurs into all types of different climates. So we wanted to let the player be able to genetically modify a dinosaur to really fit into that environment. If you've got a park that's set in a taiga environment, we wanted to be able to offer some nice, more snowy dinosaurs, or maybe more of a desert pattern and skin color. And that's kind of what we looked at when we had to design all these new body patterns, body colors, and pattern colors, and the player can actually mix and match these. And that's really cool because it means that the players can now really create the dinosaur that really fits into this new environment, offers a lot of cool creative decisions that the player can now do.
And kind of harks back to the kind of natural way that animals do tend to sort of colorize themselves into the environment themselves. We've spoken quite a bit about the kind of our own research that we would do into dinosaurs that you may not see in the films, but working collaboratively with Universal is a great opportunity because then we have all of their reference as well. Obviously there's a huge franchise behind it, and part of Jurassic World Evolution 2 also was looking at the latest film, Dominion, and the colour and pattern variation tools that we've got in-house then allow us to build these inspired by the film skins. So you can see the powers here. I'm going to give them the short name because I can't say the long name, unlike these experts. And that offers an opportunity to create actually bespoke models as well as patterns as well to really get that film inspiration across for these very unique looking dinosaurs. And more recently we also looked at the Camp Cretaceous, the TV show on Netflix, which my son is very proud that I'm somehow associated with that TV show, with the incredible looking bioluminescent patterns that we saw in the TV show, again on the power on the right hand side here, as you can see behind me. Really gives us opportunity to increase that uniqueness and also look at the authentic patterns and skins that are coming out of the Jurassic World franchise itself.
And that also, just to say, that also ties into some other departments as well, where in audio, for example, with the Parasaurolophus, we've tied in the correct audio that comes either in the film or with Camp Cretaceous in order to give those dinosaurs with those skins the correct audio that goes alongside. And I believe in gameplay you guys have done something.
Yeah. From a design point of view, some of these dinosaurs are going to have different stats. I mean, the Kentrosaurus in Camp Cretaceous is twice the size of the base version, so it makes sense for it to have different stats, different behaviors, and different animations as well.
Yeah. We had to create a whole new set for her to make sure that she still worked with her original Jurassic World Evolution counterpart, which was a good opportunities for some new social behaviors.
And more recently, with the Dominion film and downloadable content that we've released for the game, we saw for the first time feathered dinosaurs, a very much anticipated and much requested sort of feature in both film and game. So we, back at Frontier again, we looked at our engine, we looked at our pipeline, our tools, and we created what I'm coining myself is the fuzz on top of the Therizinosaurus head, technical term, all the way through to the longer, more elegant feathers you can see on the Pyroraptor as well. Again, really adding to that authenticity. It was a really fun challenge to come to see how we create these really unique looking dinosaurs in an authentic way. So we have a model, we have color, we have patterns, but we actually need to move these things around, these dinosaurs around our enclosures and give them some behaviors as well, don't we, Amy?
Yes, and importantly, the first step to making our dinosaurs move is to literally make them take a step. So we begin by creating a walk cycle. We look at films for reference, and if our dinosaurs aren't in the films, then we look at real-life counterparts, but more on that in a minute. So once we create, we work on creating a walk cycle, we get the weight, a sense of timing, a bit of personality in there, as well as working out how far they step. I mean, that's a big part. It literally dictates how fast they walk around. We then create an improvement from the first game is we've got this wonderful strafing system. So we create the strafe left, you've got strafe right, make them walk backwards. So that allows our dinosaurs to move in all the directions you could possibly need them to. And in order to make them turn, we've actually got on-spots, which aren't particularly exciting to look at. It's literally the same walk, but on the spot. So as our dinosaurs come to take turns, we'll start to add in some of the on-spot, which makes them take shorter strides, whilst blending in maybe a bit of strafe left, so they'll start turning left, whilst turning them. And of course, they'd be a bit straight. If that was just the case, it'd just be rotating. So we've got a nice spine flex system as well, which literally pulls the nose and the tail of the dinosaurs around to make them more closely follow the paths that they are taking. And then, of course, new to Jurassic World Evolution 2, we've now got flying and marine reptiles to contend with. And these BDs have obviously full 3D range of motion. we don't usually see birds strafing through the air, so we don't really have strafes to contend with this time, but instead we've got more animations to make them go up and down. There's even more than you can see here. I didn't want to bamboozle you all with them. So as well as making use of this system to blend all the directions in, we've also got they use their spine flex system to make them curl. But in addition, otherwise we'd have quite a flat motion at the minute. So we've got another system which literally tilts them to allow our birds to majestically fly through the, not birds, they're reptiles. But
It's fine, I make that mistake all the time, it's fine.
Yeah, so they will majestically bank through the air and fly around in a more believable way. Our marine reptiles do something similar, but obviously they're suspended in water, so they rely less on their animation to drive them and more on the code system. So they'll follow nice curved paths, they'll have spine flex, and they'll tilt. Otherwise, our Mosasaurus would be quite stiff as she navigates the world. And of course, once we've navigated anywhere, we can start doing our behaviors, start doing all our fun things. So we've got you've got your more behavioral things, like animations, right? So you've got your more behavioral animations, so like you're sleeping, you're eating, you're drinking, things our dinosaurs need to do to be part of the simulation. And then, of course, you've got the more characterful moments, like your preens, your rest, they can just chill out and just be relaxed, it's great. New, though, for our feathered dinosaurs, we've got this beautiful shaking system. So, as Emma says, most of our environments are tropical. We've also got snow, you've got dust. As it's raining on them, it's going to get into their feathers, it's going to really irritate them, so they're just going to want to shake it all off, just to free up those feathers, just to make them feel more like they're a part of the world and reacting to it. I touched upon it before, but of course we've got social interactions, so we have even more opportunity to express personality of our dinosaurs. I don't know what's going out there.
I'm going to say it's for us.
So when we look at creating any animations, we begin by looking at the films, obviously. We get most of our inspiration from the film.
That wasn't me.
Just imagine it's still there.
Imagine there's animation still happening.
So, where was I? Completely gone now.
The metric.
Yes, so we look at the film for reference. We look at, oh God.
It's all right.
Good?
There we go.
So yeah,
You saw nothing. It was all fine.
So yeah, we look at the films, as I was saying. If our dinosaurs aren't on the film, in the films, we look at real-world animals, and we look for inspirations for things. So like your raptors, like your Deinonychus and your Troodon, we tend to look at the really big things like cassowaries, those really crazy Australian birds. And then, obviously, your funkier birds, like your ostriches and your emus, are more the direct inspiration for things like your Struthiomimus and your Gallimimus. So we can get a little bit of realism in there. Of course, for the really, really big creatures, we don't really have, like, there's nothing out there that is really a Stegosaurus, for example. So we look at really big animals like rhinos and elephants, just so we can get a sense of weight from them, make them feel massive, and just make them feel believable. For example, our Dimetrodon here, a Dimetrodon here is seen in a short sequence in the film, so we don't really get to see how they eat, how they drink, how they just chill out. So we draw heavy inspiration from reptiles. So we were looking at crocodiles and alligators. Like this social itself was heavily inspired by the way reptiles would just walk all over one another. Yeah, that's basically how we create the movement for our dinosaurs.
Again, having the privilege of working with you and the team, I think it's incredible. You touched on it a little bit. Just the single kind of pieces of elements that bring together to actually get a dinosaur what you think is really simple. Just walk through an enclosure and swing your tail about. Actually, it comprises of so many different pieces of animation sets coming together, the code behind it to actually blend it all and make it look seamless. And the social interactions as well are probably my favourite part of watching dinosaurs. Particularly, I'm very upset we didn't put the T-Rex in one, but there you go. The T-Rex social interaction, seeing these two giant, dinosaurs that we're very used to, but in a very different light. They sort of snuggle up to each other, and it's a very endearing and realistic portrayal, I think, of what a T-Rex would look like. So big and cuddly, and not. So we've got them moving around. but we need to give a voice to these rawsome dinosaurs. I've practiced that pun, you can tell. Henry, you and the audio team heard the call. How did you answer it?
Please stop. So we, the same as with animation, what we're aiming to go for in audio is authenticity to the films. The franchise has already built all this amazing soundscape that we want to try and build upon. And the first step that we're going to be talking you through here today is to do with designing audio for dinosaurs that are seen in the films. So we have an example here of the Pyroraptor, and on the left you can see 3 audio files which are the social reply and how we have built those. The first step is the section that you can see surrounded in a little red box, which will be the audio files we've received from Universal that were used in the films. This is given to us as here's everything the dinosaur did, which we'll then organize through, work out what fits certain different types of calls, what can be grouped together, and we'll then work with that to build around it in order to maybe make any changes or maybe slight improvements that we might want to make, and use the sections underneath that you can see here that we've added to it in order to build around it. We can expand upon those elsewhere to create a vocabulary that you don't necessarily hear from the film. For example, the sound of a Pyroraptor doing a kind of medium growl, not wanting to sound particularly angry, which is something I'll show you in a second, built out from how we've built around what we have originally. So, like I said, you've got the red box, which is 3 of the original assets from Universal, and then underneath we've layered on top a whole different array of source material, which may be from other animals that we might know that exist nowadays that we've got good recordings of. It might be things we've done ourselves to do. There's quite a lot of human noises that go into a lot of these different things, so gargles and things we might have done. And one thing that's very common in the Universal brand of Jurassic Park is using things like tables scraping across wood, those really screechy sounds, which are what give so much of the kind of tension to what dinosaurs are doing and really making it sound like they're exerting themselves during those particularly impressive roars. I believe if we go to the next, we now have audio of this.
I think I might.
So those are those 3 calls that you can see there on the left, based around the original Universal asset with some things added on top. Now, if we go to the next slide, please, Adam.
You're welcome.
This is where we move on to. Someone's plugged something in.
Extra sound effects there. That's not dinosaur calls. We're not going really left field with it. Don't worry.
This is where we move to certain parts of the vocabulary that we've needed to build to elaborate upon what we have from the film and to match all of the amazing animations and behaviors that we come through with. And here we have an example of, I believe, a low grunt, as it's been called, which is built, like I said, from what we've used to build around the original asset. We can now expand upon to build more things which still sound like they come from the same dinosaur and still sound correct and authentic to the Jurassic franchise. So if we listen to this one. And we can use those. Whoa. We can use those in different animations in order to, explain and to use storytelling to help the player understand the different emotions that the dinosaur might be going through. This then translated into something we've not done before and which we did for Jurassic World Evolution 2, which is underwater. Now, the dinosaurs that you hear from the films and from the first game are generally above water. Obviously, we do have a couple of clips of the Mosasaurus in the most recent films, but those are quite often when he's kind of jumping up and grabbing something out of the water, doing some big roar. What we quite quickly discovered is those gritty, kind of growly roars don't translate so well when you're underwater, as underwater you might have a lot of different audio selling the feeling of being underwater to the player. So above ground you've got birds, maybe a bit of wind, something like that, and underwater you've got quite a noisy ambience around you as you are underwater. So for this, what we decided to do is we took a lot of inspiration from things that you would be familiar with hearing in modern day life with things like whales and dolphins. So whales, for example, have very long tonal calls that carry very well through water, and dolphins use quite transient clicky calls, which we also used on some different things. And these really translated well to sell the dinosaurs, but give you this entirely new soundscape while you're underwater. And again, I believe we should have some examples. I think that's all of them. Yeah, so there we have, for example, some things you would have heard, and then the vocabulary around those. That was an array of different marine reptiles that we have, and each will have their own vocabulary, which includes said calls. So we've got vocalizations for these dinosaurs, and we've tried to keep them authentic to the Universal brand. But now what we need is to fill in all the other gaps for the audio that these dinosaurs might make, such as the Foley, which includes things like eating sounds, footstep sounds, movement sounds, rubbing on the floor, that kind of thing. The stuff that you'd only really notice if it sounded wrong. It's a bit of it's a bit of the sad side of audio is you only really notice it if it's done wrong. Here we have an example of Duncan McKinnon, who was the lead audio designer on Jurassic World Evolution 2. Early on in production, we decided to do a pretty extensive recording session to really improve all the different eating sounds that we have from the first game, and to give it so much more detail so that you continue to be immersed in the process, and to try and iron out those possible things that maybe in the first game weren't as convincing as they could have been. So in this recording session, we bought a whole series of vegetables and a whole series of different meats in order to mess around with them, make as many noises as you can. You're ripping lettuce apart, crushing peppers. We did buy some fried chicken and just ate that as part of it, which gave some really nice audio for both the crunchiness of the skin followed by the gore underneath from the meat. And it ended up coming out really, really nicely for a lot of the fights and attacks that we use for some of the carnivores. All in all, this all ties together to create what we hope is a complete soundscape for each dinosaur, and will help sell your immersion in the game and make sure that you feel like these things are really living, breathing creatures. Here's an example. With that being an example of the eating sounds we have across the various sizes. I think specifically of herbivores, they're going from your enormous sauropods that are, doing big slow munches, all the way down to the kind of the Gallimimus or the Pachycephalosaurus, which have the quite unique beak-shaped mouths. So we have to have audio to cover all of these different things to make sure that everything sounds correct.
It does finally explain why I kept having to approve fried chicken on the project budget as well. So now I know where it all went. Thank you for that, Henry. But on a serious note, it is fascinating to know where inspiration for sound effect comes from, such as dragging a table across. You'd never have thought that until you actually break down the elements. And when you put it all together, it really does add so much personality, as you can hear. And the audio team have done a fantastic job. They really have. But that's not the last step. We now have a moving, breathing, living dinosaur, but we actually then need to implement it in-game and also tie into the new gameplay mechanics that came along with Jurassic World Evolution 2. And that is James and the design department's area, isn't it?
That's right, yep. So we've got these dinosaurs, they look great, they sound great. The question for the design team is, how does the player interact with these dinosaurs? How do the dinosaurs interact with each other? And how do the dinosaurs interact with the world? And when we're answering those questions, we're always trying to keep the design pillars in mind. So these are sort of a series of priorities and guidelines that we create right at the start of development to say, this is what the game is, this is what we care about, this is what the experience that we're trying to give to the player. And for dinosaurs, the relevant pillars are that we want the behavior to be really authentic to the film and to how we think these animals might have behaved in real life and the sort of environments that they would have lived in. And then for the player, we really want to push two things, which are creativity, making your ultimate Jurassic World, Jurassic Park, and engaging management. So if you have full creativity, you can do whatever you want, which you can do in Sandbox, obviously, then there's less challenge, right? So if we have, we want to toe the line between ultimate creativity and creating a sort of interesting puzzle for the players. So one example of that is dinosaurs having unique needs and welfare requirements. So for this example, we got the Sinoceratops. It wants water, forest, and ground fiber, and you can fulfill those needs in a variety of different ways with different types of foliage, depending on what they're asking for. If they're asking for fruit, maybe you can give them a ginkgo tree, and things like that. And the idea here, to tie this into the authenticity, is that we think about what kind of environment would this dinosaur have lived in real life, and how do we see them in the film. So for example, the Compsognathus is seen in a kind of beach environment in the film, so we make sure that it's asking for a lot of sand, a lot of water, so it kind of, you get that movie moment in your own parks. It's also beneficial for the Compy because it's so small that if we had it in the really tall grass, you might not even see it. And these needs all tie into the dynamic territory system. So you can see it in the image here. The blue area is the area that the dinosaur considers its territory. And it's a really cool feature because they actually go and they physically move around and they claim the space. And seeing the territories evolve over time really makes the dinosaurs feel alive. And this, so that's making them feel really authentic. And then in terms of the management side of things, it's up to the player to come up with enclosures that don't have too much cohabitation conflict. So if two dinosaurs don't get on, you either have to keep them entirely separate or give them enough space that they can form their territories in separate areas. And territories will grow dynamically, they'll shrink dynamically and move around. So if you introduce a new dinosaur into an enclosure, all of the territories can sort of move apart, provided that there is actually somewhere valid for them to go, and reach a sort of equilibrium, which I think is a really nice behavior that mimics natural animal behavior. So yeah, that's how we create a puzzle for the player in terms of which dinosaurs can go with which other dinosaurs and what do they want in their territory, as well as making it feel authentic animal behavior and tying it back into the film.
So that's really a whistle-stop tour of how we, attempt this incredible task of bringing these prehistoric species back to life. As we saw, it starts with that concept phase where we're taking a lot of time to research whatever papers or reference that we have got from scientific papers all the way through to the film reference, how we then add some color and pattern variation to it to create unique and authentic looking dinosaurs, then how we move them around in the enclosures and how they behave, how we add a voice to the Rawsome dinosaurs, just to get that pun in there one more time, just in case you didn't hear it the first time. Then, of course, how it actually all ties together into gameplay mechanics, ultimately giving you the chance to build your own Jurassic World and manage these species and hopefully not have too many breakouts. Now, at this point, I'm going to ask you to give my guests a wonderful round of applause for their talk today. And we also have about 10 minutes or so for any questions. If anyone has any questions for us on the talk or on dinosaurs today, don't ask us too many times how to pronounce certain dinosaurs, though, please. If you do want to ask a question, there is a microphone in the centre if you want to step up. Don't be shy.
Do you have dominance? So if you've got two males and one female, do you assign dominance to one over another during the game?
Yeah, so all the dinosaurs in the game, in the film, are female, but we do have a concept of dominance, and each territory is going to have an alpha. That alpha determines some of the qualities of the territory, so if they have a certain trait that impacts what they want in their territory, then that'll be all driven by the alpha, and then they'll fight or socialize to determine who becomes the alpha. So yeah.
Great question, thank you.
Have you got any plans for a third game?
No, we've got nothing to announce on future titles. We're still obviously, we've just released the Dominion pack, so we're still excited to look at the parks and the worlds that people are building on the current game. 2 questions. You're taking it very easy on us. Thank you, though. No other questions? Oh, we've got someone coming. Very hard to see.
For the kind of animation things, how much do you consider musculature about the dinosaurs? Because there's a lot of muscles tend to have a huge impact on how anything kind of moves, especially joints and how it goes. So I'm kind of curious how you've kind of incorporated that.
Yeah, we've got a dynamic system that runs over the top of our animations, so we've got jiggle to add additional weight and mass to some of our larger creatures. But yeah, we really consider the musculature and the skeleton structure, especially when we animate our dinosaurs. Quite famously, we've got dinosaurs are quite famously depicted with this kangaroo-like posture, where their wrists are always like in a very pronated position. So we've been very wary of trying to make sure that they're more accurate in their representation, because dinosaurs famously are more in the clapping position. That's how they hold their hands, for the theropods anyway.
Yeah. Anyone else? Someone coming down?
Hello.
Hello.
This is probably a question more for the animators and artists, I guess. Do you have any background in dinosaurs, or are you kind of more from a animal background, or are you generalists? Like, where do you sit in that?
That's a good question.
Do you want to go
I'll
first?
begin. So I've been animating dinosaurs since the first game. So for about almost 6 years now, I think, I've been animating dinosaurs. So I've had a lot of practice. I don't know if Emma has this answer.
Yeah. Well, I've joined as a concept artist for Jurassic World too. But that being said, I have been obsessed with dinosaurs since I was 5 years old, and that never really went away. And then when I got the position to work on Jurassic World Evolution 2, I was a really big player of the first one, so that was really exciting. So before that, it was during quarantine, I would spend all my time just watching YouTube videos about dinosaurs.
Yeah.
So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, that too. I was mad
it's
on dinosaurs as a kid.
There's such. I think there's so many stories. If you spoke to the development team, there's so many different stories. For example, our CEO Johnny Watts, he actually has a background in zoology. His bachelor, I think, was in zoology, so he's very passionate about dinosaurs and animals. Nick Rogers, our director of art animation, I believe he saw Jurassic Park and wanted to get into animation because of Jurassic Park. Jurassic Park was the very first film I saw in the cinema when I was much younger. So there's so many different kind of connections and lovely little stories about bringing this game, and something we get to do it as a job. So yeah, it's a good question. Thank you.
Hello.
Hello.
This is a question for the sound guy.
Hello, finally.
Yeah. With the source material, that's incredible that you can get it straight from Universal. That's really awesome. When you approach a sound, do you go source material and then you just think, what could you layer on that? Or do you approach a sound before the source material and you already have an idea on what you want it to sound like?
So that's a really, really good question. And one of the main differences is between designing dinosaurs that are in the films versus the, 70 other dinosaurs that aren't in the films or so. So initially, for the initial production on the first game, they were using the Universal asset as their kind of inspiration for how they wanted everything to come out. So, for example, if we were to try and be absolutely correct to how they might have sounded, it's very unlikely that they all sounded very growly and roary in the way that they do, but that's the cinematic universe that's been created. So we're taking inspiration from the general soundscape of how they sound in game, and how they sound in the films. And then with dinosaurs that we're making that are from the films, we will base it around what we have from the film generally. There is some times where we might think that doesn't fit what we're trying to go for, or I've had this amazing idea and I'm really happy with how it sounds. Perhaps we can push that slightly more and we can move slightly away from the universal assets. But generally with film dinosaurs, we will work around the universal assets and try and spread them out. And then, like I said, build a vocabulary outside of that that relates to it, but isn't necessarily from the film because they might not have had that behavior in the film. And then non-film dinosaurs is hey, this is the same family as this is kind of what it sounds like in the film. Let's make something that fits that, but is different. And it was one of the biggest challenges of it, for example, making a family of dinosaurs that's maybe 8 or 9 dinosaurs, all of which have to sound like they fit the same mold because they're from the same family, but all have to sound completely unique within themselves. And that was a really big challenge moving through, which I guess for everyone really, all in the same boat for that. Yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Yes, yeah, thank you.
No worries.
We're all just expecting you to say, I based it around fried chicken. However I could include fried chicken as a reference point, that was where we were going from. Any other questions? I feel like I'm at an auction now. Going once, going twice. No. Okay, well, thank you very much again for joining us here at the panel. And I hope you enjoy the rest of EGX. Thank you.
Gonna break this chain off the run.